Right now, you're bored. Maybe not completely, maybe it's just a hum, a low, restless itch underneath whatever you're doing that made you open this video in the first place. That feeling has existed in every human being who ever lived. For 300,000 years, your ancestors sat with it, in the dark, around fires, in silence. They felt exactly what you feel right now, that unbearable gap between the present moment and something more. And here's what nobody ever told you. Every single thing that defines your world, fire, the wheel, writing, cities, surgery, the internet, none of it came from necessity. It came from boredom. Not hunger, not fear, not survival instinct. Boredom. The thing your brain treats as a malfunction is actually the most powerful creative engine in the history of your species. And the moment you understand how, you will never waste it again. The story starts not in a laboratory, but in a cave, 73,000 years ago with someone who had absolutely nothing to do. In 2018, archaeologist Francesco De Erico and his team at the University of Bordeaux published findings on a fragment of silkrete rock pulled from Blombos Cave, South Africa. On its surface, a crosshatch pattern, 9 deliberate lines drawn in red ochre, 73,000 years old. No practical function, no map, no record of a kill, just pattern. Just mark-making, just a mind that needed somewhere to go. That fragment is the oldest known drawing in human history, and it wasn't made by someone trying to survive, it was made by someone who had survived, who had eaten, who was sheltered, and who then sat down with the cognitive equivalent of nothing to do. This is the first thing science has quietly confirmed. Boredom is not the absence of thought, it is thought with nowhere to land. Psychologist John Eastwood at York University spent over a decade studying boredom. His 2012 paper in Perspectives on Psychological Science defines it precisely. Boredom is the desire for satisfying mental engagement when none is available. Your brain right now is a prediction machine. It is constantly scanning, projecting, solving. It does not know how to stop. When there's no problem to fix, no threat to track, no goal to chase, it turns on itself. It starts generating. That generation is called the default mode network, a system in your prefrontal cortex that activates specifically when you are doing nothing, when you zone out, when you stare at a wall. Neuroscientist Marcus Reichel at Washington University first identified it in 2001, and what he found stunned the field. The default mode network is more metabolically active than almost any other brain state. Your brain works harder when you're bored than when you're focused. It is not resting, it is searching. And 73,000 years ago, someone in that South African cave let their brain search, and it found a pattern, 9 lines in red ochre, the first spark of something that would eventually become every painting, every novel, every equation ever written. But here's the question that changes everything. Why did it take so long? Anatomically, modern humans have existed for roughly 300,000 years. The Blombos drawing appears 73,000 years ago. Art, tools, language, they all explode around 50,000 years ago in what archaeologists call the Great Leap Forward. For 250,000 years before that, silence. Why? Because for most of that time, your ancestors weren't bored enough. They were running, hunting, migrating, surviving in ways that left almost no cognitive surplus, no leftover mental bandwidth to wander, to wonder, to invent. It was only when conditions stabilized, when food became reliable enough, when shelter became permanent enough that the human brain finally had spare time. And spare time for a brain like yours is not rest, it is ignition. But here's what nobody talks about. The most civilization-defining inventions in human history were not built by people solving urgent problems. They were built by people with nothing urgent to do. Consider the wheel. For most of history, we assumed it was invented to move heavy things, a logical solution to an obvious problem. But the archaeological record tells a different story. The earliest wheels, found in Mesopotamia around 3500 BCE, were not on carts, they were on pottery equipment. They were used to make art, to shape clay, to create objects of beauty that had no survival function whatsoever. The wheel was a toy before it was a tool. The same pattern repeats through every major leap in human history. Writing was invented in Sumer around 3200 BCE, not to preserve knowledge, not to record laws, but to track grain surpluses. Bureaucratic boredom. administrative surplus. Someone had more than they needed and needed something to do with the counting. Even fire, the most fundamental human technology, shows signs of being refined not just for warmth or cooking, but for light, for the ability to sit awake after dark and do nothing useful, to gather, to talk, to think. Anthropologist Polly Weissner at the University of Utah published research in 2014 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, comparing daytime and nighttime conversations among the Jew-Hansi people of the Kalahari. Daytime talk, practical, economic, problem-solving. Nighttime talk around fires, stories, imagination, speculative thought. Fire didn't just cook food, fire created the world's first scheduled idle time. And in that idle time, the human imagination was born. Now bring this forward, because this is where it gets personal. In 2014, psychologist Sandy Mann at the University of Central Lancashire ran a now famous experiment. One group of participants was assigned a deeply boring task, copying numbers from a phone book for 20 minutes. Then both groups were given a creative challenge. The bored group won, decisively. Not by a little. Their creative output was measurably, significantly higher than the control group. Boredom had primed their default mode networks. Their brains had spent 20 minutes in that restless, searching state, and when a creative outlet appeared, they flooded it. Your ancestors didn't just accidentally stumble into civilization during their downtime. Their brains were structurally, neurologically rewired by boredom to create. And now consider what you've done to that system. The average person in 2024 picks up their phone 144 times per day, according to data from reviews.org. Every moment of potential boredom, every cue, every commute, every 30-second gap between tasks is immediately filled, sealed shut, eliminated. You have become, for the first time in 300,000 years of human history, a species that has successfully abolished boredom. And your creative metrics show it. Psychologist Kyung-hee Kim at William & Mary analyzed 300,000 creative scores using the Torrance tests of creative thinking across decades of American data. Published in 2011 in the journal Creativity Research Journal, creativity scores rose steadily through the 1980s and 1990s, then began declining in 1990, sharply, consistently across every age group. The decline maps almost perfectly onto the rise of constant digital stimulation. This is not a coincidence. This is causation with a 73,000-year paper trail. Your brain was never designed for endless input. It was designed for rhythms, engagement, then emptiness, and then the searching that emptiness produces. Remove the emptiness and you remove the search. Remove the search and the wheel stays clay. The painting stays a blank wall. The fire burns, but nobody tells stories around it. Here is the discomforting truth you have to sit with. Every time you reach for your phone the moment silence arrives, you are not escaping boredom. You are escaping the most powerful version of yourself. The version that builds things, that imagines things, that changes things. Tonight, at some point, there will be a moment, a gap, a silence, a few minutes where nothing is demanding your attention, and the pull toward your phone will be almost gravitational. Most people will fill it, but now you know what lives inside that gap. You know that 73,000 years ago, someone sat in a cave with nothing to do and drew 9 lines in red ochre. You know that in Mesopotamia, someone with too much grain and too much time invented writing. You know that around a fire in the Kalahari, someone told the first story. All of it, the wheel, the word, the city, the rocket, began not with ambition, it began with an uncomfortable silence that someone didn't run from. The next time boredom finds you, and it will, don't kill it. Let it search. You have no idea what it might find.